everyone, it's Nina and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. In this vlog, I wanted to make some progress on some series that I am in the middle of, as well as maybe round out some series they only have one book left to read. I don't care about you, but I am notorious for abandoning projects when I'm 90% of the way through. I do this with shows too, where I'm really consistent with watching them, and then I will stop at the second to last episode and never finish them. Something about having a finite ending, it scares me. I decay what that says about my psyche, but we're going to be breaking that habit because I actually have a lot of series that I want to cross off my list as finished for this year. And I feel like that serotonin boost of actually crossing those off in my reading journal and reading spreadsheets will be worth it in the end. And also for a lot of these, I am legitimately wondering what is going to happen and I need that closure. So that is the plan for what we're going to be doing in this video. Now let's get into some of the books I think we're going to be reading. I currently have 2 picked out, but we might add a couple more as I make progress in these ones. The first one I have is A Power Unbound, which is the 3rd and final book in the Last Binding trilogy by Freya Marske. This book I am so incredibly excited for. I really enjoyed the series overall. The first book I gave 4.5 stars and the second book I gave 3.5 stars. This series is an adult historical fantasy romance series set during the Edwardian period and primarily follows a bunch of magicians, and by that I mean actual magic users in high society in London. And overall has this plot of them trying to find these magical MacGuffin artifacts that are the key and the source of all of the magic in England. I really like the overarching plot in these stories besides just the romances. But this one, I think the romance is going to be one of my favorite aspects of it because it is following our main character Jack, or Lord Hawthorne, who is a character we've met in the previous 2 books, and then his romance with Alan, who is a character we met in the last book. I mentioned this before, I think in other videos, but Hawthorne is my favorite character from the entire series. He's a little bit older than everyone else in the friend group, and he's got just such intense, grumpy dad energy. And then him and Alan kind of have this somewhat antagonistic, enemies to lovers energy going on. But it's more so the fun enemies to lovers where they're more just throwing one-liner quips at each other versus being actually mean or angry at the other person, which in my opinion is the superior way to do enemies to lovers. And like I said before, I really like the overarching plot, so I'm excited to see how everything will wrap up in this last book. So yes, I'm really excited to get into this one. The next book I'm planning on reading is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. This is the 2nd book in the Emily Wilde series. I read the previous one when it came out last year and gave it 4.5 stars. This is an adult cozy fantasy series that's told in an epistolary format, following journal entries of our main character Emily Wilde, who is a professor studying fairies. In the previous one, she was traveling to study this remote type of ice fae in this fake Nordic country. And in this one, given from the title and some things we learned in the last book, I think she's going to be helping her academic rival and love interest, Wendell Bambleby, out in finding this map of the fairy realms. It's really cute. I really like this author's interpretation of fae, and overall the books are quite light and fluffy. And I think the romance that we see on the side is very cute as well. So yes, those are the 2 books we're going to be starting out with. Like I said, depending on how quickly I read those books, I might add a 3rd or 4th into this vlog as well. And with that intro out of the way, let's get into the reading vlog. Okay, so I wanted to come in and do my first update since I have made a lot of progress in reading A Power Unbound. I wanted to start off by giving a proper summary of what this book is about. So this book is following Jack, aka Lord Hawthorne, my beloved, who was previously a side character in the first 2 books in the series. And it follows his romance with Alan, who is a reporter and a thief. All these books have a gimmick of one person in the relationship being a magician or someone who's trained in magic, and the other person being seemingly normie until it gets revealed that they have a secret magical power. Alan's thing is that magic doesn't work on him. It kind of just washes off of him or bounces off of him when people try to use magic on him. So for the sake of the overarching plot, they are trying to find this item that's hidden in a magical house, and they think Alan will be able to get through the wards because he is unaffected by magic. Alan agrees to help the whole crew out. If in exchange, Hawthorne will use some of his connections in high society to get him a stable job, essentially. So it's kind of this forced proximity situation of neither of them wanting to spend time with the other one, but they have to for the sake of the mission. They also are class divided because Alan is an Italian immigrant trying to make it in this very restrictive and prejudiced world, and he hates Hawthorne for the sole reason that he's a seemingly snobby rich bitch, which kind of justified. Now let's get into my initial thoughts in reading this. I think I'm around like 100 pages through. There were some parts where I was confused, but I think it was mostly actually because of the writing style. I don't really think I noticed this in the previous two, but this one feels like very quirky in some of the metaphors and choices of description and sentence structure that are used that made me have to like reread things a couple times. I think if I was listening to the audiobook, I wouldn't have any problem because I would be able to get like the cadence of the sentence and therefore get the meaning much more easily. But I think in reading it, I do feel like I can kind of like lose focus in what is actually the point of a sentence sometimes. Talking about the romance, I do think that this dynamic would be really annoying if it was like any other characters, but because I like them both so much, I'm kind of like fine with it. Alan is just like kind of assuming that Hawthorne is this stuck-up rich bitch, which is kind of like a fair first impression. But then he's like completely flabbergasted when Hawthorne is like, actually I voted to tax rich people, and is actually like on Alan's side in terms of the plight of the working class. Hawthorne's whole thing is he's basically like given up explaining himself or trying to like shoot down rumors and keep up appearances, because he feels like he's lost everything already after the death of his sister, and like just like wants to be left alone and not involved with anyone. And low-key, I eat that shit up. I just love it when a man is like hurting and would rather shut out the whole world instead of allowing himself to love again. But then the love for another person breaking down his barriers, ugh, it's so juicy. This is also kind of a weird thing to comment on, but I really love that Hawthorne is like older than everyone else in the friend group. He's like 34, which is so funny because of his dynamic, especially with Maud in the previous book, where she was like 18, 19 when he first met her. And she's like super intense and gung-ho about everything, and he's like, these children will not stop tormenting me. Truly the like grumpy bi uncle energy is insane. But anyway, I'm really enjoying the way the book is going so far. I feel like all of the like added plot elements and like stuff we've learned has been really interesting. And I'm excited to see like how everything's going to come together in the end. And also seeing more of the like romantic development of Hawthorne and Alan. So yes, that is my update for this book so far. And I will come back to you soon when I read more of this. So it's been a couple hours and I have another update for how much progress I've made in A Power Unbound. I've made a lot of progress since I last talked to you. I'm currently at page 219, so I'm a little over halfway through the book. Talking about plot, there has been a lot of drama. There have been some reveals and some fights have happened. The plot, as of like where I just left off, has been pretty intense, and I kind of do know where the ending is going to go, but I'm not 100% sure how we're going to get there. We're definitely in the like all hope seems lost phase of the plot. So I'm interested in seeing how everyone's going to like bounce back for like the actual final confrontation to happen at the end of the book. So that is how everything's going on the plot side of things. Now let's talk about the romance. Okay, so Hawthorne and Alan. We've had 2 smut scenes so far, and I'm like, okay, how do I talk about this without getting demonetized? Implying that I'm even monetized to begin with, which I'm not. So Hawthorne and Alan have almost the exact same dynamic in the bedroom as Crane and Stephen from A Charm of Magpies. And I'm pretty sure that Freya Marske has said in interviews that the Charm of Magpies series by KJ Charles is like a huge inspiration for her in coming up with this story. In the fact that they are both like fantasy historical romances that follow magicians that take place in England in the like late Victorian era to like early Edwardian era. And in particular, the characters of Crane and Stephen are really similar to Hawthorne and Alan. They're more so similar in like archetype versus personality, and I really liked the dynamic of Crane and Stephen when I read A Charm of Magpies. So I am enjoying some of those aspects kind of carrying over in the relationship of Hawthorne and Alan in this book. So far, the like more smutty themes have been definitely like gearing towards it being like them playing a character, doing like a role play in the scene that they're in. And I feel like at the point we just got to in the story, we're starting to see like their more like romantic feelings for each other develop. It kind of had already been building up a little bit, at least on Alan's side, as he like realized all of the things about Hawthorne that he had assumed were true actually not being that way. And then we kind of got some reveals from Hawthorne that he was basically attracted and interested in Alan like from the very first moment he met him. But of course has been putting up that like shell of like coldness and indifference to people, because he doesn't want to eventually get hurt from having his like emotions be revealed. So I think at the point we're at right now, we're going to like see them both open up a lot more and have more of the like romantic development of their relationship come to the forefront, which I'll definitely be excited to finally see happen. But yes, that is how things have been going so far. I'm really enjoying this book overall. I was a little hesitant at the very beginning because, again, what I said earlier about like the writing style not being as easy to read for me as the previous 2 books in the series had been. But I feel like I've gotten really used to it now, and I've been really enjoying my time seeing all the old characters. I feel like whenever I'm not in the POV of a character, I like them a little bit more. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of Violet from the previous book, but I've been really enjoying her scenes in this one. So maybe I will eventually go back and reread the second book and see if I like it a little bit more now. But yes, those are all my thoughts so far, and I will come back to you probably in the next couple days when I have another update. Hello, in classic fashion, it's been a couple days, but I wanted to give you another update for this vlog. So I have now finished A Power Unbound, and I wanted to give you my final thoughts on it. I forgot if I mentioned this, but I knew from book 1 that there was a chance that this series could take a more high fantasy, whimsical approach, and we have gotten there, and I really like it. I feel like in this last section, there were just like a lot of really good moments with Jack and Alan, both of them together and also separate, talking to other side characters, that I feel like made them and their relationships with those characters feel a lot more fleshed out. I was a bit surprised though for how long it took for us to what I assume is going to be like the heart of the emotional aspect of the story, which is like Jack's relationship with his dead sister. And I do think I was a little bit let down by that, maybe because I just had like different expectations going into the book, what like that relationship and like emotional arc was going to take. But now that I finished it, I think I'm aiming to give this 4.5 stars. I really liked a lot of this book. I was a little hesitant at the very beginning, but my like fears were quickly squashed, and I ended up enjoying a lot of this book. I think the main reason it's not a 5-star, even though it's like kind of on the edge of it, is that there was no point in this book where I like felt this like unwavering love and like had the impression of like, oh my god, this book is perfect, which is usually like an emotion that will come upon me when I'm reading other books that I give 5 stars. So yeah, it's just like slightly below a 5 stars in my eyes. I did also tab this, which you probably can't tell at all. I did that kind of intentionally. Obviously, I wanted to keep like the design of the sprayed edges. One of them was a light green that I used for just like plot related moments, and the other one was a darker green that I used kind of like as a catch-all, both for like romantic moments, lines I really liked, or just like other funny things that I wanted to remember. And very early on, I also did like a couple post-it notes of like some of my thoughts on things. But I think that was mostly just because I wanted to like interact with the text more and also like get myself back up to speed in terms of everything going on with the plot. But after a while, I kind of just like fell back into step with what was going on in the story, and I didn't like interact with it as much. Although I probably could see myself going back and adding more post-it notes in the future. And now that I've tabbed this one, I think I also would probably end up tabbing the first 2 books in the series. Specifically the first one again, because I do want to reread that book. And I also want to convince my wife to read that book. So I think it'd be fun when we both end up doing a read of that one for me to go through and tab my favorite moments. But yes, that was my full review for A Power Unbound. And actually over the course of the last like 5 days, I have started and finished another book. And that was A Case of Possession by KJ Charles, which is the second book in the Charm of Magpies series. I wasn't planning on reading this now, but as I was finishing up A Power Unbound and maybe had like a fourth of the way to go, I was like, I want more of that flavor, but a little bit lighter, which is really what this series is. I don't think it's as emotional as the Last Binding series, even though it does have some of like the same darker elements. I feel like the Last Binding series is more like a trilogy of fantasy movies, and the Charm of Magpie series is more so like an episodic action TV show. To give you a summary of what these books are about, generally they are these like Victorian/Edwardian historical fantasy romances that follows the relationship of Lucien Vaudrey, or Lord Crane, who is an English lord who has spent most of his life living in China, but then comes back to England after his father dies to like settle his estate. And he ends up meeting the magician Stephen Day, who helps him get rid of a curse that Crane gets inflicted with. In the second book in the series, this time around, we are getting like a combo storyline of Crane, who's being blackmailed by someone that knows that he and Stephen are a couple. And on the more magical side of things, Stephen and his team are trying to work to stop someone who is using magic to summon giant man-eating rats. I gave this book a 4 stars. I think I ended up liking this one a little bit less than the first one in the series, which I gave 4.5 stars, because it was a little bit more rambling and not as focused as the first one. This one is more smutty than the first one is, and I'm not mad about it. Although I feel like plot-wise, it was a little bit more confusing, especially in terms of like what plot elements we should focus on for the final confrontation, which made it just like land a little bit flat. Whereas like the final confrontation in the first one is definitely like my favorite part of that book. I thought it was so cool and it made me like Stephen as a character a lot more. And this one just didn't have the same like impact that the first one did. But at the same time, I did really enjoy it. And I'm excited to read the last book in the series. Both of these books were also on my 24 books to read in 2024. So I'm glad I'm making more progress on that list as time goes on. So those are all the reading updates I have for you guys so far. I think my goal for the rest of the day is to start Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I've literally done nothing except put a bookmark into this top of it. But I'm ready to dive into this one now that I have finished the other two books I was reading. So I will talk to you guys tomorrow when I've made some progress in this one. Hello, so it's been a little while, and over the last week I have been making a lot of progress in reading Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I'm currently a little over halfway. I'm like about to be on page 200. I think I'm on like 198. And so far I have been enjoying this. I definitely been reading it a little bit slower than I initially had intended to, but I have been enjoying my time reading this. So I work in higher education. I feel like this one really captures the vibe of that for the beginning section really well. And the other thing kind of struck me as I was reading it is just how much I love Wendell and Emily's chemistry and banter. I was thinking that I feel like a lot of people are like on the hunt for a Howl and Sophie coded book and are trying to find other books that are like recreating Howl's Moving Castle. And I feel like this one, maybe unintentionally, is doing it better than all of them. I feel like it's not hard to have a book that is Howl's Moving Castle coded. I feel like you need just a very like plain Jane / autistic coded woman, and then the hot magical man who is obsessed but also beguiled by her. And the dynamic of Emily and Wendell is definitely that. There's definitely a couple things from the first book I had like completely forgotten about that were brought up again in this one. And I feel like as I've gotten more acclimated to the world, I've been enjoying it more as I'm reading. One of my favorite things from the previous book was just like how inventive and unique the Fae were. And this one definitely has had a similar flavor. Although I feel like the Fae have been a little bit more weird than they were in the previous book. One of the things that's on the cover is these little like foxes. And we learn throughout the book that the foxes are also a type of Fae that are like kind of like fox and human hybrids. They have like mostly fox bodies, but then like little baby cherub faces, which was really giving me like Slewfoot energy and the like little creatures that are friends of Samson. And I really like that like creepy, cute dichotomy they have going on. I feel like it helps add to like the wonder and mystery, and also making this Fae seem both like very enticing and interesting, but at the same time a little bit creepy, and you don't necessarily want to get too close to them, which I feel like has been a big theme of this book so far. In addition, we do have some other new characters that have come into the story. One of them is Ariadne, who is Emily's niece, who is also studying to be a dryologist like her, which is a professor that studies fairies. And then there's also been Rose, who is like the chair of their department, who is this like older guy that doesn't really trust Wendell for both like stupid and somewhat understandable reasons. At first it sounds like it's complete jealousy and that he thinks that Wendell is just like a bad professor, but then you kind of learn that he does have like some more reasons for why he doesn't trust him and why he's kind of telling Emily to not trust Wendell either. And I feel like those elements in the story are a really good addition. So far, even though I am enjoying this one, I don't know if I like it as much as the previous book in the series. I feel like there hasn't been as many like full show-stopping moments as there was in the previous one. But I definitely think as we get further and further into the story, that might come about more. There have been some fun scenes that recently happened that I really enjoyed. Since the whole premise of this book is them trying to find a magical fairy door that will lead to the specific fairy court, but in the process, Emily actually went back to the location that she was in the previous book and met a character that she had interacted with a lot there, which I thought was a very cute and charming scene. So yes, overall, I am enjoying this so far. I think since I have a little less than halfway, I'm going to do my best to try and finish it today. And hopefully tomorrow I can come with you for like my final update and like wrap up for this entire vlog. So I'll check back with you soon when I have that update. So it's the next day and I have now finished the second book in the Emily Wilde series. I really did enjoy the last section of this book. I feel like overall the series really shines when it does something unique and fun with all of the different Fae characters. I mentioned before the like human-faced fox characters, and they do come up and play like a bigger role in the second half of the book, as well as there was kind of like a reintroduction of a character that we met in the previous book. And I just felt like all of his interactions, as well as like the fox character interactions with Emily, were some of like the best parts. I feel like the ending of this book was also like really interesting and honestly could have just become like a duology without there being like another part to the series. But there is going to be a third book that's going to come out sometime next year. I'm assuming in January, as the previous two books in the series came out then. And I'm super excited to see what that one is going to be like, since it seems from the ending of this book, we are going to be spending the majority of the time in the fairy world. Overall, I did like this book. I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. Again, I liked it a little bit less than I did the previous book in the series, but it still was really solid overall. I liked the ending, even though I didn't find it as dramatic as like the final confrontation that happens in the previous book, but I think it still had all of like the charm and whimsy that the previous book had. Anyway, now that I finished that book, we are at the end of this vlog. In this vlog, I read 3 different books, so I thought we would go through them really quick. Like I just mentioned, I finished the second book in the Emily Wilde series, which is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, and I gave this 4 stars. I also read the second book in the Charm of Magpie series, which is A Case of Possession, and I also give that 4 stars. And then last but not least, I read the last book in the Last Binding series, which is A Power Unbound, and I gave this 4.5 stars. So overall, I feel like my reading for the last like week and a half has been very successful. I really enjoyed filming this kind of like finishing series reading vlog. I feel like it made me be like very productive, and I got to make a lot of progress in series that I really enjoyed. Also, I think in the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I am really bad at finishing TV shows as well, and I do have a little bit of an update on that because I had mentioned that I am still 2 episodes away from finishing Hannibal, and the plan is that later today, we're gonna go over to Will's house and I'm going to watch the last 2 episodes of Hannibal. So I guess this video is also me finishing a TV show that I've been long putting off. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing if you aren't already. Consider following me on the Storygraph if you'd like to see my reading updates in real time. Also consider following my Bookstagram, which is linked in the description. I'm trying to post there a lot more frequently than I have in the past, so it'd be really nice if I had any of you guys come over to follow me there as well. Lastly, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!